Welcome to Honest Money. I'm your host, Anya, and today's episode is brought to you by Hodl. Hello, joining me today is British Hodl. British Hodl is an ex-gold equities and real estate investor, and he's been creating whole coiners since 2020. Yes, that sounds about right. Welcome to Honest Money.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
I was just checking if my microphone is on, but it seems all to be good.
Good.
So, to kick off, have you noticed, has the creation of whole coiners sped up or slowed down since 2020?
I think it had a lift, and then since 2024, I would say it slowed down.
Yeah, it's been a funny year. What do you think of last year? Obviously, a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's last year was a test of whether people actually had their own conviction or whether they were borrowing people's conviction. I think that was the test last year. This happens in every asset, by the way. It's not unique to Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the more volatile the asset, the more your conviction gets tested, and the more you demonstrate whether your conviction again is borrowed or actually internal. And so, I would say that a lot of people got exposed for borrowing conviction last year.
Right, that's interesting. I'm surrounded by hardcore Bitcoiners, and yeah, I've not really felt that. Maybe on Twitter a bit, but yeah, I'm even not getting a lot of the posts that I used to when I first joined Twitter. I feel like the algorithm is very strange at the moment. I'm not even getting a lot of the people that I'm following, seeing what they're saying. So I feel like the sentiment is not something that I'm tracking all that well.
Well, just to let you know then from the outside that the sentiment's in the toilet. So that's where the sentiment is right now, to summarize it.
Thank you. I tend to lean into humor during times like this, and I don't know if you've seen, there was a short social media clip borrowed from a movie, and someone put superimposed captions on top of different scenes, and it's a bunch of kids singing off key, and then the first kid's singing, and it says S&P 500 up this much, and then and then gold's up 72%, and it's just rolling the eyes. And then Bitcoin comes in at -5, singing the most off key, until the music teacher loses her mind and finally finds the one kid who's got perfect pitch, and that happens to be silver, up 175%. So it was just one of the funniest social media clips that made me laugh because it was so spot on.
Yeah, I'm very happy for my gold and silver fans for the last 6 months. We'll see what the next 6 months holds. Certainly for the last 6 months, they're celebrating justly based on price action.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned listening to your channel, I found it really interesting, and I didn't know that apparently the culture within the commodities, the metal commodities, gold and silver, tends to be very doom and gloom. I'm not, again, sentiment check. Is that really how they are? Do they really think expecting the global markets to melt?
Yeah, I would actually argue that's the core sentiment, most of what I feel when it comes to Bitcoin as well. Bitcoin has a little bit more of a positive outlook on the future, but I would say that most Bitcoiners lean towards the idea of taking down the system and et cetera, et cetera. And the reality is that most people wouldn't know what to do if the system collapsed, even if they're holding Bitcoin or gold or silver. But yeah, gold and silver investors, it's one of the things that kind of took me away from that industry, was just kind of the energy of the people that were in the space was just it's not something that I relate to or what I was kind of brought up with. So yeah, I like to call them doom and gloom boomers. They don't have to be boomers, but they're all doom and gloomers.
Yeah, doom and gloomers. But it's interesting that you bring that up because obviously recently Danny interviewed Saylor, and that has been an
Fantastic
interesting.
interview, by the way. Fantastic
It
interview.
really was, and I'm still following the comments on the what Bitcoin did on that particular thing. It's interesting what people are saying. They're basically saying Saylor told us all of us off via Danny. But yeah, I think he shares a lot of the same sentiment. He was, commenting about the toxicity of the community, and yeah, what did you think overall of that interview?
I thought it was I messaged Danny and I told him I think he did a fantastic job with the interview. The point of an interviewer is to push the boundaries, especially on someone like Michael Saylor. Michael's one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, and probably the most fastest thinking person I've ever met in my life. But, people get intimidated by that. And so for Danny to, and I think they were at times they were kind of speaking past each other. But nonetheless, I think it was extremely important, and it is extremely important for a podcaster to push the boundaries on someone. And I think that's what Danny did, and he handled the criticism really well, and I think it was overall a really good. It certainly gave anyone who understands how to listen to like TradFi markets an understanding of how Saylor is looking at things, what kind of, what I took away from that was just how Michael Saylor is looking at the landscape based on what he knows. Remember, Bitcoiners are used to, Bitcoiners are used to being spoken to very, very directly about points, like factual points, right? That's what the beauty of Bitcoin is. TradFi doesn't talk like that because there might be regulations, there might be things that are coming. You're under NDA, you're discussing things that can't be discussed in public. So then you have to be like someone like me. I can see through what Saylor is saying and try and figure out like what does this actually mean? Why is he saying certain things? And so then this is how when BlackRock was talking about Bitcoin, I knew they were going to come into the game. Like it was because I was listening past the words. And I think Bitcoiners need to get better at that. Certainly, that's what I've tried to do with my YouTube channel. Like, okay, look, this is what was said, but this is what it actually means. And if this is what it means, then this is what should happen. And that's what I think. I think Danny did a fantastic job overall, and I think Michael Saylor handled it really well. I think Michael Saylor, certainly let people like me know kind of what the landscape is and how things are working and how we should be thinking about treasury companies and things like that. So I think overall it was a fantastic interview.
Yeah, I thought so as well. I didn't actually think at the time when Danny was asking him the first question that kind of seemed to trigger Saylor that he was expecting that reaction. It almost, and I think he said in a different interview, perhaps with Mark Moss, that that basically he had some difficult questions lined up for him, but he didn't quite get to those, which I thought was interesting.
That's how it goes, right? You never know which one. You never know which way the conversation's gonna go.
Yeah.
I think he did a fantastic job, and I think Michael answered all the questions fantastically. I think Michael's, real intention there was to kind of try and reframe how everyone's looking at things. Certainly for me, he did a great job at that. So I think overall it was pretty good.
So what was your main takeaway? Like, what do you think was Saylor's main message from that interview?
I think the main point was, from a simplistic point of view, is that every company is going to be buying Bitcoin. So this is not a unique thing. We should be pissed off at the companies that are not buying Bitcoin because they're not doing their best to increase shareholder value through this scarce asset. And when you're trying to judge a Bitcoin treasury company based on its price performance, you're missing half of the story, because what happens when every company has some Bitcoin on the balance sheet? Every company is going to be trading at a percentage above or below its Bitcoin MNAV. And that's just how this is going to go. This is the birth of a new industry. And so what's going on right now is that the conversation has been overtaken by bad traders. And that really needs to be reframed, because bad traders do not dictate what an industry is doing. And so we want companies to buy as much Bitcoin as possible. And that's what we should be focused on. And the fact that people are getting into these companies at 7 times multiple, and then that company is compressing down to a 1 times multiple in a mid-cycle bear market is completely normal. But we should not be dictating, the value of adding Bitcoin to a balance sheet based on a bad trade.
Quick one for the Aussies listening. Hardblock is offering a $10 sign-up discount right now. And if you're with another exchange, ask yourself this: are they Australia's longest running Bitcoin-only exchange? Because if not, maybe it's time to switch. Head to hardblock.com.au/join/honest money and start stacking sats today. Yeah, and obviously you've spent, many years in investing. What would you say is the most underrated investing skill?
I have 3 rules to Bitcoin, and it's the most underrated one is step number 2, which is shut the fuck up. That's the hardest thing to do. Because if you look at what's happened here, is people bought their Bitcoin and then they sold their Bitcoin to put it into a company with a 7 times multiple to its Bitcoin. So you basically exchanged 1 Bitcoin for 0.21 Bitcoin. And now you're pissed off that it's taking a little bit of time for that company to build up from your 0.21 Bitcoin to your 1 Bitcoin. But that was the trade that you made. So you didn't understand what was going on. And you made that trade simply based on price action and what was going on in the moment. And now you got to sit there. Now you're in the shut the fuck up part of the trade. So that's always the hardest part. People just don't know, how to shut down that activity bias that we all have. And especially, it's going to get worse because, I'm sure you've seen that the US market's trying to go to 24 hours trading. When that happens, this is only going to get worse because everything's going to be open all day around the world. So you're going to wake up and you're going to be thinking about what's going on with the price action. You're going to go to bed and you're thinking about what's going on with the price action. So speculation, volatility, and everything else is only going to go up here. So that's really the skill. The skill is the shut the fuck up part.
Yeah. On that, I'm glad you brought that up. Sorry, not the shut the fuck up part, about the 24 trading part. I'm glad you brought it up because one of the questions I have is, Bitcoin is obviously very volatile, and the fact that it's trading 24/7, it's always like the first asset to move or react to something, especially on the weekend. If everything else opens up on the weekend, would that reduce Bitcoin's volatility? No, sorry, not. I didn't word that the best, but will it make it less volatile because there'll be other assets that people will be able to trade?
Yeah, I think at that point, the advantage that Bitcoin has for being the first mover liquidity kind of starts going away, right? Which is an advantage and a disadvantage. You kind of want that to happen because then, the Sunday dumps that you're seeing on Bitcoin kind of go away because the actual asset that you want to dump can just dump rather than Bitcoin dumping. So volatility starts to come down as the asset matures, and that's a normal maturation cycle for an asset.
Yeah. But one question I've been asking a lot of my guests this year that I find very interesting, and I'm curious to ask you as well, is what is your first memory of money that you had as a child?
That's a really good question. Trying to think back as far as I can. I've got memories coming up, but I'm trying to see if there's any
Archives.
further back. Yeah, go through the archives a little bit. I would say that I remember an argument going on about money. That's probably my first memory, was an argument about money.
Well, that makes more sense about your rule number 2.
Yeah, look, to me, money has always been about building a moat, right? Success was about distance. It wasn't about anything else. Like, right, I like nice things, but it's really more about building a moat and a distance between me and whatever the thing with no money is, right? That's kind of the arguments, the negative emotions, the everything else that comes with not having enough money. So yeah, that's I guess that's what it's always been for me. It's about how far can you get, and then you get to a point. I don't even know if I'm far enough yet. That's what's interesting, right? I don't know if you're ever far enough because if it's just an emotion, then you're trying to plug that gap and build that moat. And the question is, how far do you go with that moat? How big do you want the moat to be? And the bigger the moat is, the safer you feel. So you just keep going.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I thought you were going to say the bigger the moat, bigger moat, more problems. I don't know. I just thought of Biggie Smalls for a second. Yeah, but that makes a lot of sense. I can certainly relate to that. My background as well, coming from, an underdeveloped country and money being very scarce.
Talking about Australia?
No, I was born in Croatia and,
I know.
ex-Yugoslavia. Okay, yeah. Well, Australia kind of seems to be trending towards a funny financial path where, the impression I had of the country first coming here and the first, few decades that I spent here, it was very, very stable country. Whereas like that stabilization is just seeming to kind of crack a little bit. Like the economy is not great. The cost of living is not great. People even earning high income are having housing stress. So it's interesting times here. I don't know, like, do you go back to the UK at all these days?
Yeah. My parents are in the UK, brothers in the UK, friends are in the UK. Yeah, I go back probably 3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah. Is it kind of a similar situation there?
Yes, except I'm from London, so the UK is really kind of like London plus to me. So in London, there's still things moving and shaking. We've got our issues like anywhere else in the world, but there's still it feels like there's things moving and shaking depending on which industry you're in.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. But yeah, so what are the other two rules? You mentioned one.
Yeah. Well, the first rule is you buy Bitcoin. The second rule is you shut the fuck up. And then the third rule is you get fabulously wealthy. But you got to shut the fuck up to get to the fabulously wealthy part.
Yeah. And like, I know you're very passionate about creating whole coiners. Do you think your message is going to change soon in terms of what the aspirational goal for the Bitcoin should be? Like, is aspiring to get a whole coin still a reality for many people, or are we looking at 0.1? Like, what's the goal?
My messaging is not going to change. I actually went through this after we crossed 100,000. So technically speaking, based on the data that I can see, after $100,000, about 0.45% of the world can now get to one Bitcoin. So I definitely went through this discovery process of like, do I now change the message? What do I do with this? And I had to kind of go back to why I got involved in even creating any content. And I decided that my message won't change. I think the one Bitcoin should be the North Star. I think my reasoning around that is still relevant. I think if you don't have enough, I'm very, very sensitive to the happy hippie nature of Bitcoin, which is like, it's kind of been taken over from a content or a, conference or whatever space by people that like to hug trees for some reason. And the reality is it's a monetary network, which means you have to own enough of the network to be relevant. If you don't own enough of the network, I don't care how many empanada stand makers you teach to use Bitcoin to sell their fucking empanadas. It's not going to matter for you, your family, your bloodline, or anyone. So you have to have a certain amount of Bitcoin. And I think that number should always be get to one Bitcoin. And whether you get there or not is totally up to you. Depends how much you care about your future. Depends how much you care about your bloodline. Depends how much you care about, who comes after you and who carries your last name. If you care at all. I know many people that don't. So it just depends on what you want. But my message will always be get to one Bitcoin. It's never going to change. And that also, I understand that over the arc of time, it makes me more and more irrelevant, and that's okay, because that's what that is the beauty of time. Time does pass, and it's also the beauty of Bitcoin. It is actually scarce. Therefore, the timestamps that happen along its path should also be scarce. And so I want my message to stay the same, and it will be a timestamp along Bitcoin's history. And the people that heard the message, got to one Bitcoin, will be great. And the ones that heard the message, thought it was a joke, will suffer. And that's exactly what they should do.
Mm. So paint an aspirational picture for me. What does one Bitcoin, what could that mean for someone?
So I think Bitcoin is going to many millions of dollars, US dollars per coin. And I think that at one Bitcoin, you are now probably in a group of 40 to 50,000 people in the world over time. And I think that any financial institution in the future will be chasing your business. I think you will have all the services that are currently available to high net worth individuals available to you. And I think you'll be able to build a moat around yourself that will protect you, protect your bloodline, protect everything that you stand for. And you will have the ability to assimilate and to put into the world what your ideas are. If you're not at one Bitcoin, you will have to get together with people who hopefully agree with you. But more likely, you'll be throwing your support behind people who have enough Bitcoin, and that'll be your choice, to whether to do that or not. But you're definitely not going to be one of the decision makers in this future world.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who may have a Bitcoin or two or three, is the most important thing holding on to that Bitcoin for like an X amount of time? Like, what is your advice there? Travel?
Forever.
Oh, forever.
Forever.
Laura?
Forever. It amazes me when I hear Bitcoiners talking about, if you need some cash, just sell the Bitcoin. It's like, what was the point of telling people to get to a certain amount of Bitcoin if the message now transitions to let's just sell it? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. You got to hold it forever.
Not your keys, not your coins. If you're holding Bitcoin, your self-custody setup needs to be done right. MindRax delivers paranoia-grade security so that you can sleep at night knowing that your money is protected. Take control and secure your money the honest way. Head to mindrax.com/honest money.
Imagine if people that held Manhattan or let's say Sydney land said, you know what, I'm just going to sell the land, right? They wouldn't be the wealthiest people in Australia right now. So your goal is to own as much of the finite land as possible and then to hold it forever.
Yeah. So how do people then live off their Bitcoin?
There's many different ways to do it, right? Right now, you can lend against your Bitcoin. Right now I can borrow against things like iBit at central bank rates, and that's the beautiful thing of the TradFi world kind of joining Bitcoin. It's like I can go to private banks in Australia, in Switzerland, in Singapore, anywhere, and borrow against my iBit at central bank rates. So you can do that. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to use income funds that are out there, like Michael Saylor's STRC, right? So there's ways that you can now start to do that. But I still don't think it's time yet. I don't think that market is matured. It's still maturing. So if right now you should either have a business or have a job, and that's how you quote unquote survive until that economy and that world is built out, which it is being built out at this point.
Yeah, I'm in my accumulation phase and I hope to stay there for as long as I can. And then, but I definitely have an interest in these products. I'm just not there yet in my journey to even start considering them. But I do see that, they're important to understand. But What I heard you say on one of your podcast episodes is that one of the things you're really passionate about is bridging the gap between TradFi and Bitcoin, which is also one of the reasons that I started this podcast. In fact, a few people of the interviewed are kind of like have their foot in both worlds. But just on that, like, why do you think that is so important?
Well, because there's two parts to this idea of money, right? There's money and then there's currency. And money has been confused as currency. Like US dollars, Australian dollars, pounds is not technically money. That's a currency. And how it works is you have money, which is your real estate, your equities, your gold, your Bitcoin. And then at some point, you convert that real money into currency to then activate that currency in the economy however you want to do that. In that process, in that conversion process, there's something called credit markets. And that credit market, it's very important to understand how to use that credit market so that you never need to sell the actual money. That's how wealthy people stay wealthy. So when Bitcoiners want to say, no, I can just spend my Bitcoin, right? You're an idiot, because that's never how long-term wealth has ever been created. There is a process of using the credit markets to convert some of that money into currency that then can be used. And so that's the TradFi world. That's why TradFi is here, because they see this process going on and they know that Bitcoin is going to be a great way to use to put the credit markets on top of the Bitcoin to then expand the credit markets. That's why they're here, and in your job should be to figure out how to use those markets.
Yeah, I do have a confession. I do spend a little bit, but that is only because I make irrational economic decisions to hopefully make Bitcoin the medium of exchange. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I think that's a hallucination. I think that's a hallucination in the Bitcoin space. It's one of the things that, you know, I've been criticized for as well. I think that, you know, I call it the circle jerk economy of you know, everyone trying to spend their Bitcoin. It's like, you know, and then people come back and go, oh, but you can spend and replace. So I'm like, well, you're an even bigger moron, because in most of these Western countries, you've got a capital gains liability. So you can spend your Bitcoin, but unless you are committing tax fraud, you have to pay a tax on whatever Bitcoin you spent. So why didn't you just spend the fucking dollars to start with?
Great point. But in Australia, we do have like up to $10,000 for personal use, and you have to kind of spend it. You know, if you've acquired it, you have to spend it within a certain time frame. You can't like wait for.
I want Bitcoiners that want to spend more than $10,000 for personal use.
No, I've not spent that much. It's just like when there's Bitcoin events and things like that, I do like to spend a little bit. But I appreciate your perspective, and I think it's funny for calling it out. Have you had any other criticisms in what you do? Because I do appreciate.
I get criticized every day. I get criticized every day for everything I say. There's a criticism. I've been in this now for 4 years, and if I didn't have the thick skin that I do have, I would have probably been depressed by now. Like, it is what it is. Like, I got criticized for saying BlackRock was absolutely coming into it when they filed the ETF application. I got called a moron for a year until the ETF went through, because, like, the fact that BlackRock filed that application told you it was happening. But Bitcoiners didn't see that because they needed to see the actual result. But that's never how TradFi signaling works.
No,
right?
Yeah.
So I've been criticized for everything. So yeah, what you can go down the laundry list. Everything I ever talk about, I get criticized for. Whatever it is, every single thing.
Okay, I'm at that stage in my podcasting journey where the criticism is still very like scarce. Like there's not that many. But yeah, I'm not sure my skin is. Mostly the criticisms just come from like trolls, just, you know, someone seeing a YouTube short and saying Bitcoin's going to zero, and it's like, okay, like things like that. So it's not really criticizing me directly, but
you're on baby trolls right now. Just
baby trolls, yeah. I got criticized by the BSV guys. They came after me. I have been criticized on LinkedIn by TradFi, and that was very interesting because when I first started talking about Bitcoin and just writing some posts about it, it really seems to trigger a lot of TradFi professionals, which I found very interesting.
Wait,
Yeah,
there's
like some,
people using LinkedIn still? That's still a thing?
yes,
I
still a
didn't even
thing.
know.
Yeah. No, there was like some very like high positions like CEOs and quants and
Well,
I
everyone's a
don't know.
fucking CEO now. Everyone's a CEO of their own $40,000 a year business. Like you never know who's the CEO anymore. It's like, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
take anyone seriously on the internet. It doesn't matter to me. It's the internet. My favorite are I had trolls coming after me for like everything, my past. They dig up they do, and I keep telling them. I'm like, I was DMing one of them. I was like, you keep firing the same bullets, like, and they keep bouncing off, and you're not learning your lesson. Like, let me teach you how to do this. If you want to actually try and take a shot, you need to load a different bullet in the chamber. Like, stop saying the same thing. Go find something else. And of course, they can't find anything else.
Pick a different weapon.
And there's nothing yet. But they keep firing the same thing, and it's like, okay, well, this just doesn't work. And of course, people that are rational, logical, high net worth, the target audience that I'm trying to speak to, the more they listen to what I'm saying, the more it makes sense to them because they're actually adults, and then they come into my vortex, and that's all. That's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for people that actually, who my message is for, to come into the vortex and get to enough Bitcoin for themselves.
Mm. You're very efficient.
I'm very efficient.
Yes, like you answer very succinctly, and we've kind of moved through my questions very
I've,
quickly.
I've done this. I've done this a couple times.
But some people just like really elaborate things, and tell
I think
long.
a couple of people, a couple of podcasters have said that to me, and I think it comes down to I am really not interested in having a profile on the internet. Like my decision to become British Hollow and to talk about this and put myself out there was because I realized that people like my parents were about to get completely fucked. Like they've spent 35 years building a property portfolio. That property portfolio is about to be rugged because you can't just keep compounding real estate at 15% a year without productivity in the economy going up and wages going up. It's not possible. It's not feasibly possible. And then TradFi saw Bitcoin, was like, wait a second, we can just print as much money as we want, shove it into this asset, and there's no one jumping off a building, no one being homeless, no social consequences at all of this. So I kind of saw, okay, this is the path that's going to go down. And so, I have everything I'm saying, I crystal clear know exactly who I'm talking to and what message I want to put out there. And I try and avoid all the distractions. So I guess I will take that as a efficiency.
Mm. And I did hear you say that you feel like you don't fully fit into the TradFi world, and you also don't fully fit you don't feel like a full-on Bitcoiner. What do you feel like?
I feel like myself. I don't know. I don't really try and fit in. Like wherever, if I see a good idea, I'm gonna say it's a good idea. If I think it's a bad idea and then it turns out to be a good idea, I say I was wrong and it was actually a good idea. So yeah, I don't try and fit in. I just try and take what makes logical sense, which way the world is gonna go, and try and say that. And then of course people with delusional thoughts about how the world's really gonna work hate that because it's like telling them that they're not going to get their favorite toy at Christmas, so they lose their minds. It's just it's part of the game, I guess. I don't really try.
Well,
I
that's
don't really
very
feel like
interesting. I'm very curious to know what something about Bitcoin did you say in the past that you turned out to be wrong about?
let's give a perfect example. This was, and it's going to be crazy. So I bought MSTR on the very first trading day after they announced the Bitcoin strategy in 2020. The very first trading day. I saw it and I thought, this is going to be TradFi's way to get Bitcoin exposure because there's no ETFs, there's nothing. So fantastic, you would say fantastic, right? I was right on that. the ETF came out, the iBit ETF came out, and as it was coming out, I was like, I don't know if MSTR still has the same value proposition that I saw when I bought it. So when the ETF came out, I downsized my position in MSTR and converted it to iBit. I was right for about 3 weeks, and then I was aggressively wrong for 3 months. And I had to sit there and go, why the hell was I, what am I not seeing here, right? And then I realized that MSTR's value proposition was never an ETF. It was a speculative platform built on top of Bitcoin's volatility. And then once I understood that, I had to regain my position, and I'm still probably thousands and thousands of shares short compared to what I had before. But, we're doing all right.
I love that story. I love that story.
Need a way to sign, verify, and secure your Bitcoin? Australia's one-stop shop for Bitcoiners has you covered. From signing devices, nodes, and backup solutions to Bitaxes, Daycall, and apparel. Visit shopbitcoin.com.au.
So
and I went through this in public, by the way. I had a video come out telling people I'm selling my MSTR, this is why I'm selling it. And then months later, I had a video coming out where I'm buying back my MSTR. This is why I'm buying it back, and this is what I was wrong on. So this has been out, you can see this transition through my
journey.
YouTube.
Yeah. That's it takes a lot of courage, I find, to just put yourself out there like that. I don't know. I think it does.
It takes a lot of courage.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Maybe. So maybe that's what, I don't know. Maybe it is courageous. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not,
I'm addicted to being right. I'm absolutely, utterly addicted to being right.
But are you though? Because you happen to, admit that you were very wrong with this. So
absolutely, and nobody understands how much I called myself a dickhead for being wrong about that. I am absolutely, utterly addicted to being right. And I felt more stupid than anyone could make me feel in my own head because I was wrong.
Yeah. But explain to me, why iBit? Why not buy Bitcoin directly?
Well, there's many different reasons for that. Number one, you may have, firstly, both are options, right? There is the self-custody option, then there is the iBit option. Number one, it will always be cheaper to use TradFi's tools on iBit because the rails are already built. The insurance policy is already there. The rails are already built. You'll be able to plug into the TradFi infrastructure without any issues. So it's always going to be cheaper. If you want to ever get into borrowing against your Bitcoin, doing any of the sort of the TradFi stuff, it's always going to be cheaper to use iBit than to use spot Bitcoin. Now, saying that, further than that, you might have a retirement account where you cannot buy spot Bitcoin. You just cannot do it based on the terms of your retirement account, in which case iBit is a solution. You may not give a shit about the quote unquote revolution of Bitcoin, and what you want is price exposure. And that's what most Bitcoiners kind of miss. Majority of the world doesn't want the revolution. They want the price exposure. And so iBit becomes an easy way to do that. You now no longer need to sell your house, sell your equities, sell whatever, move it over, get a Coinbase account, buy the Coinbase account, do 17 hours of research, order your cold storage wallet. Then that thing has a leak of data, so now you need to order another one. Now you need to get that. You need to understand how your address works. You then need to go into your exchange. You then need to, now with KYC, you got to tell them whose cold storage is. You got to type the address into it. It's now going to take 10 minutes of you sitting there going, did I just fuck this up and I've lost all my Bitcoin? And it's now going to then show up on your cold storage. Now you got to figure out your cold storage. You now got to worry about someone bashing you over the head and taking your cold storage. You got to worry about multi-sig. You got to do this, that, and the other. Or you just open up your broker account, type in iBit, and click buy. That's the friction that's been erased with iBit.
Yeah. Obviously, full disclosure, I am the Revolution Bitcoin person, but I do see that someone who doesn't have another choice that, obviously there's regulatory restrictions or whatever, you can't put your Bitcoin, I don't know, retirement account, it makes sense to get iBit. But yeah,
I think it makes sense for anyone who's in Bitcoin to have some cold storage Bitcoin. And so the way that I've started telling people now is assign a probability on the world falling apart, right? Within the next decade. And then whatever that probability is, have that in cold storage. Now your run bag is safe. And the rest of it, maybe figure out how to use some of these TradFi options.
So what would that be? What might that be, like, percentage-wise? Say someone's got a whole coin. Like, what have you worked that through? Is that individualized?
It's individual, right? It depends on what you think, what percentage chance there is for the US falling apart in the next decade. And by the way, it's not the US, because the society might fall apart. But the US financial markets, the US dollar is not going to fall apart. So you got to assign a probability to that. I think that's sub 10% for the next decade. I think it's probably sub 5% for the next decade, right? So it depends on how you do that. Plus, it depends on how you want to protect your assets, how you want to do, there's so many different conversations that are individual conversations that determine how you allocate your Bitcoin.
But on that world falling apart scenario, because there's obviously people like Ray Dalio who, talks about the US being I guess, at risk of losing the dollar as the world reserve currency. Then you have Larry Fink saying the same in the investor letter to BlackRock investors and shareholders in 2025, I think it was last year. So, when you have kind of like these big players and hedge fund managers saying these things, doesn't that seem like, for a lot of people, again, gold and silver going up, that is a real to what extent as well? It might not be like a full fall apart, but it could be a partial, substantial fall apart.
But if the US loses the US dollar as a reserve currency, that doesn't mean immediately that the US dollar falls apart, right? Like, none of this happens immediately. So you got to be smart. You got to evaluate. This is you're managing money, right? You're managing money, right? So there's going to be some work involved and some thinking involved. And of course, if you don't want to do that, then there's always the option of spot Bitcoin. The crazy part is like, no one's saying don't have spot Bitcoin, right? If that's how you feel the most comfortable, that's how you should have it. And Bitcoin's beautiful because it's the first time in human history where you can actually own the spot asset at the same price as a multimillionaire or Michael Saylor or Larry Fink. We can all own the asset at the exact same price. So absolutely, spot Bitcoin is absolutely an option. Everyone should consider it. But again, it depends on your personal situation.
I think I heard most of that. Yeah. Okay, well, that's given me a lot to think about. I guess I haven't played out all those doomsday scenarios, nor do I really want to be honest. Like, I just want to stack sats in peace and, not spend too much time about thinking about the world melting. But for whatever reason, it does sometimes feel that it's almost like been nearly like 100 years since there's been like a major crash. Like 2008 was bad. But I don't know, like, it just pattern wise, it feels like maybe it's going to happen in the next decade.
Well, 2008 was really the crash, right? Like, and that type of credit market freeze happens once every 80 years on average. That was, funnily enough, that was my first ever recession in business. So when people tell me we're in a recession, it's kind of a joke to me now, because it's like, 2008 was a recession. Everything we're seeing now is nothing compared to what that was. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to see one of those. I just don't.
Yeah, see, that's interesting. Australia, like, again, I wasn't involved in personal finance or finance very much at the time, but, hearing from people, family and friends at the time, we didn't seem to get that affected by it. Like, yes, a lot of mortgages defaulted. Some people had to sell their homes before they actually default on a mortgage, I should say. And you know, for the most part, people recovered fairly well. But
Yeah, but
now
why they
it feels
recovered,
like,
right?
why?
You know why, right? They recovered because they turned on the money printers. That's it.
In
They
Australia, I
recovered because they
don't like,
turned on
yeah, I don't know off the top of my head what happened in Australia. There was like obviously a massive injection of money into the economy during COVID, but I wasn't really paying attention to what was happening around 2008. I just don't remember. Like what I'm trying to say, like the economy didn't feel as bad back then than it does now in Australia. It feels worse now. A lot of people
Yeah,
feel like
I
we're
don't
in a
know.
recession, even though the
Yeah, I mean,
GDP is not saying that we are.
yeah, I mean, there's many different reasons for what you're feeling right now, but it certainly is completely different to 2008.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. I would love for you to share any kind of final thoughts with my audience, and maybe like obviously I'll drop in the notes section in terms of how they can find you. But do you have any last words?
Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.
There we have it. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Still here? You're one of the good ones. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. If you enjoy how we cut through the noise, consider supporting us directly via the Lightning QR code. Got a question or a thought to share? Comments are wide open. We'd love to hear from you. For bonus content and updates, follow us on socials at Honest Money Show. Until next week, take care of yourself and your money and stay decentralized.